Australians are fighting the biggest locust plague in a quarter of a century. Farmers, graziers, state and federal rural authorities, soldiers and airmen of the Defence Force have united to fight the menace. Locust infestation extends west of the Great Divide from the Queensland border, the length of New South Wales and into parts of Victoria and South Australia in a band up to 250 kilometres wide. The rural community is conscious of the size and potential of the plague.
It'd be the most serious plague we've had since the 50s and probably since the 30s.
At one stage we thought we wouldn't get any wheat.
The worst I've seen and the worst I know of.
If you let them go, they'll clean you right out.
Yeah, I'm getting sick of spraying.
What we're facing now is probably equal to, if not greater than, the big outbreaks in the mid-50s.
If it hit here, it'd be just a catastrophe. Because I've seen what they can do. They can just wipe out anything.
Good spring rainfall and fair weather have produced a rural bounty valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. But the size of the harvest will be measured by the success of the locust control program. Twice this century, plagues have devastated a less prepared rural community. Jim Watts remembers the 36 plague in the Riverina when destruction went beyond pasture and crops.
The other thing I remember from that plague, although it was pretty small, was the locusts actually eating the washing off my mother's line. And when people say that they won't eat this crop or that, I've seen them eating washing. They ate the coloured parts of the tea towels first, and then they finished off fighting for the bit that was left around the pegs.
Again in the mid-50s, serious widespread plagues occurred, affecting many landholders, particularly those in central west New South Wales. Hod Kay has not forgotten the suddenness or effectiveness of the attack.
Well, we lost all our oat paddocks, and we lost them in a matter of 2 days. And the hopper infestations prior to that infestation were nothing compared to these.
More recently, in 1976, a localised outbreak in South Australia devastated parts of the Barossa Valley. Ray Ward was among the vineyard owners who were seriously affected.
And then they proceeded to demolish the grapes, one by one, every bunch. Wiped the lot here. So out of 12 acres of grapes, I did not pick one berry. You'd swear a tornado had gone through the ruddy thing.
Ironically, the rainfall responsible for the quality and quantity of the rural bounty is also responsible for the locust plague. Their natural habitat is the arid heart of Central Australia, where above-average rainfall over many years has provided ideal plague conditions. Responsible for monitoring the situation is the director of the Australian Plague Locust Commission, Dr. Philip Simmons.
When rain does occur, there's extremely good multiplication. That's what occurred in January last, with exceptionally good rains, followed by rains in February, and there were very many swarms in March, which migrated on strong winds from the west-northwest on the 19th, 20th of March and the 3 subsequent nights, and basically produced locusts which laid in this area, which reflects the current situation.
Again, good autumn rains provided ideal conditions for successful breeding and the preservation of eggs over the winter period. Up to 120 eggs were laid by each female, and continuing fair weather ensured maximum incubation in the spring. During the first 5 weeks of life, the insects are earthbound and form gregarious hopper bands, often up to 1 kilometre long. Initial damage is confined to pasture, but may extend into crops. Each insect is capable of eating its own weight every day. The current plague is estimated to be equivalent to several thousand square kilometres of adult swarms, and vegetation loss of about 70,000 tonnes a day is expected. Up to 4% of pasture and crops is vulnerable, and losses may amount to millions of dollars. While nature is responsible for the creation of locust plagues, it provides few predators. Birds are among the more important, but too few exist to reduce plague populations. Effective control is largely left to man, but practical only during the hopper phases when the young insects are earthbound and more vulnerable. As adults, the locusts are winged and largely free to plunder at will in massive airborne swarms. All resources have been mobilised to defeat the hopper bands. Ron Hosey has led the attack in central west New South Wales.
Well, it's a pretty intense organisation involving the landholders on their own property spraying. The Pasture Protection Board's doing their share. Local government like the shires and railways and people are also committing or putting in their effort. The Department of Agriculture is very heavily involved in a lot of the coordination and involvement overall, the management of it. And on top of that, we have at our services the Air Force unit of the Australian Defence Forces for helicopters for survey work, plus 3 state aircraft, helicopters again, spread throughout the state, looking at these things from the air and pinpointing the major infestations, and this is being passed back to the landholder where possible, where his problems are, so that he can then deal with his particular problem.
Few threats to the rural community have successfully mobilised such effort. Mendoran property owner Mary Rowley has not seen such cooperation in the past 57 years.
This is much easier, I think, because every country person's helping, which I've never seen before. But all the country people are banding together, and I think we've learnt our lesson because of this fear of the grasshoppers. And the cooperation's been absolutely fantastic.
In New South Wales, the use of helicopters, both state and defence force, has proved an asset to the landholder in locating hopper band infestations. While difficult to locate on the ground, they are quickly identified from the air.
The locusts stand out as a black mark on the ground, a semicircular black stain like an oil stain. And there's also the ruined area of grass behind the movement, and in front of it it's just a normal grass, so they stand out quite clearly.
Throughout the campaign, 3 Defence Force helicopters, both Air Force and Army, have assisted with aerial survey tasks. Deployed along with 3 state-owned helicopters in the areas of heaviest infestation, they have significantly influenced the outcome of the battle. Hod Kay, Pasture Protection Board ranger at Coonabarabran, has appreciated their assistance.
The aerial survey has probably been the saving of us in this particular campaign, because in our own area we've got 2 men and we cover 2 3/4 million acres. Well, although we can drive our cars till the tyres wear off them, you'll never see as much in 3 months driving as you'll see in one day's aerial observation. So that's how important it is. It's vital.
Aerial survey is less practical in South Australia. There, locust infestations are largely concealed by low salt bush and spindly ground cover, making detection and destruction a more labour-intensive task. Soldiers and army equipment have helped to overcome the disadvantages. Their efforts have been directed by South Australian government entomologist Peter Burks.
The army involvement in South Australia is really threefold. The first part and the main aim is to help us with the survey of the heaviest infested areas with a view to determining aerial targets. The second aim is to spray small concentrations of hoppers as and where they find them. And the third aim is to provide us with a communications network for ground to air and among some of our ground operators.
124 soldiers and 20 vehicles have been deployed throughout the 75,000 square kilometres of infested pastoral land to assist rural authorities and landholders with the control programme. Army units have surveyed and treated up to 1,700 square kilometres of pasture each week, and the effort is contributing to the success of the campaign. Nature will contribute further assistance to South Australia with the coming of summer. Then lack of rainfall will create conditions unsuitable for breeding. But despite nature's assistance, Peter Burks is confident of a successful campaign.
I think the battle is being won. We are reducing the number of locusts, which is our aim. Our aim is to reduce locusts as much as possible within reasonable economic limits, so that the amount of damage that they will cause later on, in particular, will be reasonable.
The future for New South Wales is less promising. While control there has significantly reduced the size of the plague, the director of the Australian Plague Locust Commission, Dr. Philip Simmons, predicts further developments.
The spring locust campaign throughout this area has probably been the largest and best organised that there has ever been in Australia. However, eradication is impossible, and even 80 or 90% control is incredibly good. But even that would leave behind a large enough residual population, if there was successful summer breeding, to give us a very serious situation later in this year. And unfortunately, in this area here from Forbes right the way up through Dubbo, Moree, Narrabri, adequate summer rain is likely. Through the Riverina here and into South Australia, then adequate rain for summer breeding is less likely. But we certainly are by no means out of the wood. What we can do with control is keep the population in check and prevent major loss. But this may need continuing major control to achieve.
The battle now throughout Australia is confined to aerial combat, which provides the only practical means of defeating the marauding adult swarms plundering the rural bounty. Crops now are most vulnerable, and widespread damage is likely. Eradication of an adult locust plague is impossible, but with each strike, the potential of further plague development is lessened, and the prospects of the rural community improved.